Welcome to the Freewheeling Chat with Dr. Vishal Rao. Recently, the Central Drugs Standard Control Organisation under Directorate General of Health Services, Government of India, has granted permission for plasma treatment to Dr. Vishal Rao, HCG Bangalore Institute of Oncology. Dr. Vishal is the inventor of AUM voice prosthesis, a $1 speaking device for throat cancer patients. Dr. Vishal has received wide recognition from BBC, Harvard Business Review and Forbes. As a recognition to his contributions, he has been conferred the honorary FRCS from Royal College of Surgeons in Glasgow. He has also received Judy Wilkenfield Award for Global Excellence in Tobacco Control and has been a recipient of multiple state-level awards including the Kempegowda Award.
Welcome, doctor.
Hello.
Sir, basically you are an oncologist. So when did you decide that you will have to get into the treatment of COVID-19?
So there are two aspects to this question, sir. One aspect of it is that today, I'm the regional head of HCG for Head Neck Surgical Oncology, and I'm also the associate dean for research and academics at the Center for Academic Research at HCG. I also serve as the chairman of the ethics board, both for some of the institutes in the ITBT Ministry, Government of Karnataka, and as a member of the ethics board for ICMR. Now, research has been an area in oncology, and somewhere oncology has been a good friend with virology. The reason being viruses cause cancer. So we've got the human papilloma virus that causes cancers in cervix, in head and neck. We've got the hepatitis B. So there is a lot of synergy that is already there between virology and oncology. March 11th, we were supposed to be in London as a part of the United Nations meeting, which was chaired by Mr. Michael Bloomberg, the UN ambassador for the world, and Dr. Tedros, the WHO Director General, and Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. About a week before this, we actually were still hearing from them that we should continue this meeting because the WHO wanted to show this as a mark of inspiration to say we should continue this meeting, we should not hold back this meeting. So we kept getting correspondence from their office saying that we are on. And this was a very important partnership for Healthy Cities meeting where globally teams are coming together. Just 3 to 4 days before that, we got to hear that the health minister of UK got affected and the meetings got postponed. At that time, at HCG, we have a very good immunology lab. Our immunology lab has two experts who are a part of our team from ICREST. One, Dr. Jyotsna. Dr. Jyotsna is an immunologist, and she has been a research associate for Dr. Ralph Steinman, the person who got the Nobel Prize in 2011 for discovering the immune system. And I have Dr. Guru Raj with me, who is a PhD in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for cell biology and molecular biology. So we've been working on cancer vaccines and several other things, which also has intersections with virology for the last 3 years in my lab here. And we've been constantly writing about it. We've been doing our ongoing work. We've been having international collaborations where we've been working with universities such as Emory University, Atlanta, with Duke University and others. When this hit us, when this is at the time when the London meeting got postponed and we were sitting here talking about our ongoing work, one of the things that we actually resounded with each other was that this is the time that our best teams should work on COVID. So the story begins because one thing that we all knew was that there is nobody who's an expert in COVID. So in our team, we have a cell biologist and immunologist, we have a molecular biologist, we have immunohematologist, we have hematology and bone marrow transplant experts, we have a blood bank team, we have an infectious disease team, we have a clinical trials team, we have an intensivist and their teams, we have general physicians, and we have pulmonologists, 10 of these, and yet none of us alone are able to decode the virus. So what I'm representing here from not oncology, but as an integrated team that is coming forward together to make this particular commitment to say that we should solve it. And the reason for that is I believe that India today should be at the forefront of research. We are collaborating right now with Indian Institute of Science. Indian Institute of Science is actually helping us. Dr. Sandhya from their team, who's the chair of their molecular biology wing, Dr. Utpal Tatu, and several Dr. Deepak. There are so many of the researchers who have come forward there to join hands. This is where we've actually kind of blurred the distinctions between private sector, government sector, academia, industry, and all coming together as a joint team to work together. And I'm happy that we are able to bring such a team together. The intent of this being India should be at the forefront of this war and actually should show the world that like smallpox, like polio, we will even vanquish COVID. It is possible. It is at this juncture that India should do this. And that has been our sincere attempt. Whether we succeed or not is a long story, but at least when we look back, we should at least have the gratification to say we tried.
So what are the special permissions that you need to treat COVID-19 patients? It might be from the government side as well as the patient side.
So see, the most important thing, whenever you're doing anything related to COVID, there are two agencies that are involved. The two agencies that are involved as a nodal agencies are the Drug Controller General of India, the CDSCO, and we have the ICMR agency. These are the two nodal agencies that has been designated by the government of India. In addition to this, you need to have the state government permissions. So this is where it is important to initiate any research work, whether it's an innovation, a medical device, a treatment, or a data intervention and predictions. You need the consensus from the two bodies, the government of India and the state government. And in the government of India, it is the CDSCO as well as the ICMR.
Is there a special consent that is needed from the patient side as well, or how does it?
Once you get the permissions from these bodies, then the clinical trials team, which is actually having experience in clinical trials. Now, when I say clinical trials, that it is not a trial and error, because a lot of people, when people said about plasma therapy, said, oh, it's about trial and error. No, you cannot do it that way. A clinical trial means you have to have a phase 1 clinical trial, which is going to look at the safety, which is done in small tens of numbers. Then the phase 2 trial, which is done in for efficacy. And then after that, you're going to look at the phase 3 trial, which is comparative with standard arm. And then after that, the surveillance. So there are phases for going through a clinical trial. And that will only be done by a proper registered CRO, a clinical research organization. So clinical teams that have experience in clinical research, clinical trials, should then have a proper SOP, which is very simple, because this is something that we routinely do, having consents, translations, proper SOPs. For example, in this clinical trial, there is no way we can have a separate office team because in the time of a lockdown. So we've set up the country's first virtual clinical trials at this point in time. So these are some of the steps we have taken.
So once these results are recorded, which are the agencies that validate the results? Are these the same agencies, or is there any special agency that validates?
Again, whenever you are going to complete the study, you're going to go back to the same old agencies that gave you the approval for it and give them the necessary data for that.
Sir, yesterday I was just watching one of the news channels. They said something called as a power sample, that is a large sample of 1,000 or something like that. Is it applicable for this study also, or how does it go?
So see, today Elsevier's publications has come forward to be our official research, academic and clinical partner in this entire endeavor. So they have given us at our disposal the Lancet Resource Center, a very good team of researchers. I would like to specially acknowledge Dr. Ujwal, who has been helping us a lot, Hema, who have been constantly bombarding us with research, articles, messages. Now, what interestingly Elsevier found was, this is the first time, I think in this century, that they have seen that the time has narrowed from years to months and weeks for research. So there is virtually a very blur line between research and clinical practice today. So we cannot work the conventional way of saying thousands, then we will do this, and then in 1 year will come. We'll have to narrow this to a very significant time zone. And that is what currently researchers are working on, to bridge this gap between bench and bedside.
Sir, recently there was a news telling that central government has expressed some reservation regarding the plasma treatment. So what might be the reason for that?
They are completely, perfectly correct. In fact, it was much needed for the government of India to clearly communicate on this. The reason being, there was a lot of wrong message that was going on in the media, as though showing that plasma therapy is a magic bullet. So I kept telling that this particular therapy should not and cannot be done outside of a clinical setting, clinical trial setting. When you say a clinical trial setting, that means you officially register the trial, have these 10 members in your team. We submitted in the March 1st week a 239-page dossier to the CDSCO, then had 3 expert reviews by the ICMR, then by the CDSCO. After doing that in 1.5 months, we then got this approval. In a clinical trial setting, there are a lot of rules and regulations because we are trying to assess safety. So what many people started doing was trying to take the plasma from one person and giving it to another person in a compassionate grounds. Now, compassionate grounds is not illegal. However, we need to understand that such an approach can be done in dire situations when the person is critical. However, without understanding the science of plasma therapy, to jump into that may be a little in the gray zone. And this is very important to understand. That's why the Ministry of Health clearly, Mr. Lava Agarwal, the Joint Secretary, clearly stated, this should not be done outside of a research or a clinical trial setting. The reason for that being that there are several things that we still need to know. For example, is the person really negative for COVID? Who is donating it? What is the protocol to be followed when he donates this particular therapy? What are the precautions to be taken? Over and above that, in his blood, not everybody's blood will be effective. In his blood, will there be neutralizing antibody titers which will be effective? If they are effective, are they going? What is the titer? So, for example, Emory University has been telling me, I've been talking to their researchers, they've been telling me they have titers worth of that of 1:1 lakh. To some people who are having 1:64. So the 1:64 may not actually be useful. The 1:1 lakh may be very useful. There are answers that are still today not clear. And that's why it's very important for us to have a full clarity before we jump into saying that this is the standard of care. Number one. Number two, 80% of our patients will be asymptomatic. 10 to 12% of them will be mildly symptomatic. These people don't need any treatment. It is only the severe and the critically ill. There are 2 subgroups. The severe are patients who are in the ICU who need oxygen, and the critical are patients who are in the ventilator. These 2 patients are the patients who potentially can be benefited with the plasma therapy. This clarity should be there. That plasma therapy is not for every single person to be given, and that way it will be harmful.
So why is it plasma therapy given only to seriously ill or critically ill patients? Is there any specific reason for that?
There is a rationale for that. When the virus enters, it enters through the nose or through the mouth, enters into the throat, and then from there it enters into the lungs. After it enters into the lungs, within a span of a couple of days or weeks, it then enters into the blood. That is when fever starts to appear. And from there on, it starts to creating the trouble. Now, only when the virus enters into the blood is the time at which can be about as much as 1 week, 2 weeks, up to 1 month. Till the time the immunity will try to stop it in the lung itself. When it enters into the blood is the time that the plasma in the blood has antibodies secreted by the cells of the blood. And only when that plasma has the good antibodies will it be useful for us to actually at that juncture be able to build up and give that plasma to the person who is sick and ill. So the important part is plasma will definitely be useful for people in whom the virus is in the blood. And in those people, the plasma from another person whose virus has been in the blood and the antibodies have killed the virus, that such a person is an ideal donor.
Sir, there has been reports that there are multiple strains of COVID-19 virus. Now, when we identify a particular patient who has recovered, how do we come to know that he has, gained the immunity for that particular strain of virus, or is it similar for all the strains?
There are many unanswered questions in this. We know ethnicity-wise, geographic-wise, there has been variation in immune systems. But largely what we know is these mutant varieties, what people are talking about, are well within the ambit of what is known in the coronavirus family. It is not something that is like a surprise card that has come out of nowhere to say, oh, we didn't know this was existing. These are all known. So the immunity that is being existing in this group of people is largely the common denominator of it. It is not something that is surprising. So we cannot at this juncture segregate and say India is more powerful than USA because Indian people are, no, we don't have the answers for that, and that may not be right at this juncture to say.
Sir, you have been treating, I don't know whether you can share the details or not. How has been the response, sir? Are we moving towards the positive side, or what has been the response like?
For which particular?
You have been treating the plasma patient, using the plasma therapy, you have been treating the patients. How do you see it?
We have still not started the clinical trials for the recipient. We have started collecting the donors. And the donors who have been eligible for it have been tightly scrutinized, evaluated, and then given the blood donation. For the particular clinical trial patient category, we are waiting strictly for being monitored for those group of patients who will only be eligible for that. So we have still not started the particular giving the donation to patients who are eligible for that in Victoria, because as of now, all patients who are right now there are stable and don't fit the criteria for giving plasma therapy. So just because I have plasma ready, I don't have the eligibility to give it to them.
Sir, suppose, let's take a hypothetical question. Suppose this is successful now. Do you see that each of our district's headquarters will have treatment centers like this?
Absolutely. In fact, we have also come forward and said from HCG side that we will volunteer to support every single district. We will be at the forefront of this entire support. And not only that, I think state government, every institute will be able to do this effectively. This is going to be a collective effort from every single corner. And this will give a lot of reassurance to people to say that, look, we are there. Now, the importance of this is because WHO way back in 2012 actually approved plasma therapy as an effective modality for Ebola.
Sir, now the one more concept which comes around in the media is about the herd immunity. Sweden has gone for the herd immunity. 1,000 plus people died because of their concept of herd immunity. Now they're saying that 30% of their population has been infected, and herd immunity may be gained maybe in the second week of May or so on. So what's your take on the concept of herd immunity? Is it realistic?
I have read reports from the Imperial School of London. I have been going through a lot of reports. This is a dangerous card that we have to open up to. Is this herd immunity a part of the economic outlook that you're going to give, the economic step that you're going to take for the state or the country using a scientific reason of herd immunity, is what we need to analyze. Because today, if you see the story from USA, from Italy, from Spain and other European countries who are suffering from it, will you be able to shoulder the responsibility of that number of deaths using a trial concept that has not worked in those countries? Is the question many scientists are asking. So as of now, the answer would be no, we should not even venture into those, is my opinion. At this juncture, the only answer we'll have to do is build a China wall between the positive and the negative in our state, in our district, in our locality. And that way, that China wall can only be built by aggressive testing. So aggressive testing, and nothing else.
Sir, we have also been reading about SARI and other severe lung diseases. How is this different, or are they related to each other?
See,
how is COVID related?
On a broader aspect, even COVID is one among the differential diagnoses for SARI. So this is called as a syndromic approach, which means that whenever somebody has any kind of a symptom related to which can mimic COVID, you should better consider him as COVID positive and then go in that direction. That way, you may have a lot of false positives, but that is safer than having false negatives.
So finally, coming to the end of our discussion, what is your prediction for COVID-19 vaccine? How long it might take? I read recently that Oxford has already started its clinical trials. So what is your prediction, sir?
We are currently working on, from our institute, we are currently working on 3 therapies. And we are working on 2 other devices. So the 3 therapies that we are working on Convalescent plasma is one among them, but we are also working on a special cytokine therapy, which is basically to reactivate the immune system in mild to moderate people. One of the things that we are currently published, which is currently under review, is the concept that says, why is it that children who have an immature immune system are dying, are not dying, or are not getting affected seriously? And why are patients who are elderly, who have a mature immune system, 60 plus, are succumbing to the disease? One of the reasons for that we have postulated is the thymus gland, which is below the thyroid gland. This thymus gland is like a pen drive. You are a computer science expert, so I'm trying to put in technical terms. It's like a pen drive that keeps the memory of the enemy, which means the typical deaths that you are seeing in COVID are 8th day to 27th day roughly. During that time, the first sign of your immunity, which is the cells, there are soldiers in the blood. There are soldiers in the cells who are killing the virus. By the time it reaches the 1 week mark, the memory is required. So your GB has to be, it has to be not in MB, but in GBs. So the first few days you have some MB memories that is your, it's like a local RAM that is being used. After that, you require a proper hard disk, a proper GB related disk, which will keep on storing this memory and killing the viruses. That is not available, which is from the thymic cells, because the thymus gets degenerated and involuted at 60 plus age groups. That is one of the reasons we have postulated that these patients who are 65 plus and above are vulnerable to the virus. With this background, it is very, very prudent, crucial and important for us to build. So what we did in our immunology lab with spearheaded by Gururaj and Jyotsna was, they took out human cells from the blood of people who are healthy, 1 ml, small 1 ml blood. Using that blood, we actually extracted the thymus related immune cells and created a simulation environment wherein these particular cells, as though attacked by the virus, will start giving certain proteins, which we call cytokines, which will kill the virus. That injections are ready right now. The animal toxicology studies of that have been completed right now, and we have now submitted that report to the government of India, and we hopefully will be coming up with these answers very, very soon. That is for treatment of COVID. Every corner across the world, people are working. There are currently 400 plus clinical trials running right now on various aspects. And I'm happy that India and HCG is one among them. What time will it take for a vaccine to come in? It may take a year. So 2021 is when we are optimistically looking at it. The way it looks like now, I've been talking to many of my colleagues in the Australian counterparts, in other US, London, looks like the world will be in partial lockdown internationally. So which means borders will be shut down internationally for the next 2 years. Because unless you get vaccinated, you cannot be entering into another territory. Every country wants to have that assurance that you are COVID negative. That can only happen when you are completely vaccinated. That is a very important aspect that countries are now looking at. That the only way to build this China wall is treat the positive, make them negative, and immunize the negative. So what we are looking at is 2021. Until that time, intermittent lockdowns, social distancing will be the norm.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for spending your valuable time with us.
I again would like to thank you for bringing these good questions up. And I would like to acknowledge that this is the time that the golden formula for COVID is the 5 T's. Trace, test, treat, teamwork, and track. Now in that, I cannot re-emphasize the importance of the 4th T, which is the teamwork. Most crucial, I believe it is only teams collectively that can actually vanquish this virus. And I am standing here as a representation of the team that is actually holding the fort for us and doing this brilliant work that we are all collectively putting together. And we are happy that the state government of Karnataka will be proud that it is a collective effort. It's not an individual effort. It is a collective effort of such brilliant teams coming together and actually making a difference in this.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Very kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you.